Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Gettin Buzz'd. I'm Dustin Brackett, CEO and founder of HIVE Digital Strategy. And with me as always is Michael Thebeau. He's our business development manager. Today we actually have a special guest. We have Ben Baker from Your Brand Marketing. He's out of Vancouver, Canada. We're going to be talking about podcasting and what kind of impact can podcasting have on your business and why is it important? But before we do that, the most fun part of the whole thing, right, is day drinking. So we are actually drinking 1985 IPA. It's a Voodoo Ranger IPA from New Belgium. We just discovered today that New Belgium has like multiple varieties of Voodoo Ranger.
100 different Voodoos.
Yeah, so, we're getting our Voodoo on over here.
Well, you guys get to do the Voodoo that you do so well. I mean, that's what it's all about. Right? Hi, everybody. It's Ben Baker. I had to get a local beer. So this is Pacific Pilsner, right from the Pacific Northwest, right from Vancouver, one of our local microbrewers. Okay. And you know what? It's a lot of fun. It's it's edgy and it's like me and we have a lot of fun with it.
There you go. What's the beer scene look like up in Vancouver?
You know what? We are really a good microbrewery area. There is more microbreweries than you can shake a stick at. There's probably close to 40 or 50 of them within BC that I can think of just off the top of my head. And each one is different. Each one is different. Each one is unique. They have different ideas of what good beer is. And, so you could just, do a tour of British Columbia, just drinking beer. It's a beautiful thing. Yeah.
That's kind of how Denver is. I feel like every corner has a, new brewery popping up every week. And, Michael's kind of a foodie or, that kind of person in Colorado.
I thought you were going to say alcoholic.
Yeah. I was trying to nicely say that.
But if you have food with your alcohol, it's okay. Right.
Yeah. Then it's just like a night out. It's not like, you're there just to be an alcoholic.
Just a liquid diet. Yeah.
But hops and barley sandwiches.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Michael's always talking about like some new brewery or some new bar or whatever. And like, there's always like cool things that are coming up. So it's interesting to kind of hear about other beer scenes in, different areas of the world.
Absolutely.
I will say I absolutely love Vancouver and just BC in general, but next time I'm up there, I'll have to meet you out for one of these breweries that you can show us around.
You know what? There's a lot of places with it. Actually, within a couple of good walks of me, there's a couple of good microbreweries popping up, and they're just awesome.
Yeah, well, that's great. Well, perfect, Ben. So, give us a little bit of background on you and Your Brand Marketing and what you guys do.
Cause trouble. No, but seriously.
That's the word on the street.
Yeah, well, I started it. I do my own PR, so this is a good thing.
Right.
I've been in the communications game for about 25 years now. We started off in direct mail about 25 years ago, killed a lot of trees. We used to do 500,000, million-piece runs across North America. I used to do large runs for the grocery industry, for the casino industry. Had a lot of fun with that. And we built programs based on how do we build engagement? How do we get people not only to open the envelope, but to engage with the envelope and compel people to move forward? And that was a lot of fun. But a lot of the challenge was the brands that I worked with didn't know their story, first of all. They said, okay, we need to do this tactic. I went, well, wait a second. Before we do the tactic, let's be able to tell your story. Mm-hmm. Let's build and weave the story into it. Not only so the external crowd knows it, but your internal crowd, your employees know it as well. So that way everybody's on board. Everybody knows what we're talking about. Everybody's excited about it. Everybody's engaged.
Yeah.
And we can build a marketing campaign or series of marketing campaigns that are relevant. So when people come and engage with the brand, after the campaign, they're going, oh, yeah, this is what these people are all about. That's great. Okay, so the campaign matches the brand and matches the overall story. And it really elevates it. It allows to elevate it. So I've been doing that, in different avenues for 20, 25 years. I've been involved in promotional marketing. I've been involved in trade show consulting, social media, direct mail, large banner ads, you name it. Because the company for a long time dealt with almost like a print broker type situation in its early days, I got involved in everything. So the neat thing was I got to learn it all.
Right.
There's not one thing that I did phenomenally, but I always built partnerships with people that did things really, really well, and be able to sit there and say, okay, we need this. Let's go find the expert.
Yeah.
And it allowed me to learn. And that was the really neat thing. About 13 years ago, I went out on my own and your brand marketing got started. I had a partner. He decided to go one way with the company. I decided to go another way with the company, and your brand marketing was formed.
Okay.
And we've done a lot of work over the years. Our clients have been large business, large government, industry. We have some smaller clients as well, but mostly it was about how do we tell the story effectively, both internally and externally.
Yeah.
And about 3 years ago, I seriously got into podcasting. I had been a host on podcasts for years.
Yeah.
For years and years and years, people had said, can you be a guest on my podcast? I speak, all over the world. And people said, can you be on our podcast? And about 3 years ago, somebody said, you know what, Ben, you do this well. Start your own podcast. I went, what do I know about podcasting? And I researched it. I talked to some people I know that are really, really good podcasters. I said, okay, if I'm going to get serious about this, forget the technology, forget the equipment. What do I need to know?
Yeah.
The technology you can buy. I'm always upgrading lights. I'm always upgrading mics. I'm always upgrading all that kind of stuff. It changes, and it's going to continue to change.
Sure.
But the best part about learning about podcasting is learning how to listen effectively, how to weave the story in, how do you get your guests to tell their story in an effective way.
Sure.
So it lets them shine.
Yeah.
And that's what the YourLivingBrand.live show has been about for the last 3 years. I don't know if people can see behind me, but it says, what's your story? Right. And the first question I always ask my clients and my guests are, what's your story? Because if you can get people talking about their story, about where did they come from? Where are they today? Where are they going? What were the challenges? What were the successes? What did they learn along the way? There's a million conversations you can have, and they're all authentic.
Right.
And it's not contrived. And what it allows people to do is build up a content library that they can use not only for the podcast itself, mm-hmm. but across their social media platforms. That's the beautiful thing about what we do is we give our guests, and they pay for this, we give them 30 pieces of content with every show. So every client of ours comes on board. We do the pre-interview. We get to know them. We do the interview itself. They get a full show. They get the full VIP content. But the most important thing they get is they get 30 pieces of cut up, curated pieces of content they can use on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, on YouTube, on wherever, so they can continue to tell their story
right
over and over and over again.
Well,
and that's the beautiful thing about podcasting.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the mistakes that a lot of people make, right? Like they start a podcast or they are a guest on a podcast or whatever, and then essentially as soon as that's like published, they don't do anything else with it. Mm-hmm. Right? It just sits out there. Hopefully people see it. Hopefully people listen. Hopefully people care. But there's no real like campaign around it, right?
Well, it's like your website. You build a brand new website and you get all excited about it.
Right.
And then you do nothing with it. And then 4 years down the road, you look at it and go, oh, well, I got to build a new website again. And you wonder why, 95% of your traffic is original traffic.
Yeah.
And 5% or 3% or 1% of your traffic is repeat traffic.
Right.
Well, there's nothing new. There's nothing new for people to look at. There's not, you're not continuing to tell the story in different ways and engaging your audience and doing that. So if you're not doing the same thing with your podcast, if all you're doing is putting it out there once and saying, oh, okay, it's out there, thank you.
Right.
You're not utilizing it. I mean, Gary Vaynerchuk takes this to the nth degree. where on his birthday last year, I think he put out a 164-page deck, if I remember correctly, on how to get 100 pieces of content out of one piece of content. And that's taking it to the extreme. I mean, if you've got 60, 80 people behind you that can do that on
he does.
Yeah, and he does. And and he's a $400-500 million company. He's got the budget to be able to do it, and he's not staying up till 4 o'clock in the morning himself cutting and editing content. But the concept is right. The concept is you take one piece of material and you cut it up into little pieces.
Right.
And part of it you're going to share on Instagram, and part of it you're going to share on Facebook, and part of it you're going to share on Twitter, and part of it might become a YouTube video, and something might become an audiogram.
Right.
And therefore you can sit there and extend the life of the story by telling it in its snippet and in its parts.
Mm-hmm.
And not only that, you can give it to your employees, and they can share it across their mediums because it's branded, it's on message. You've already determined that it's valuable. So why not give it to them and let them share it out with 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, 50,000 people?
Yep.
Right.
Well, and so I think those are all great points, but kind of taking a step back first, like thinking about like a small or a medium-sized business.
Yeah.
Like, there aren't a lot of Gary Vaynerchuks out there, right? Like they don't have these like giant teams behind them that he can just say, okay, hey, we have this podcast, we need to turn it into 100 pieces of content. Why, like, what are some of the reasons, like if somebody's looking at, okay, I have a finite amount of resources, I have a finite budget, whatever, why should I be looking towards podcasting? Like, why should that be part of my marketing campaign?
I think because what it does is it allows you in an organic way to help somebody else tell your story for you. By having that host that tells your story for you, it's the difference between you telling everybody, I'm a beautiful, wonderful person, and somebody else say, hey, look at them. They're beautiful, wonderful people.
Right.
Right.
And having that third party help you tell your story and help you engage your audience and have it look from a third party viewpoint, there's more credibility. It's like why we look to Yelp, why we look to Glassdoor, why we look to all these different places to sit there and say, is this business credible? Should we trust them? We trust them because they're on somebody else's program and those people are talking about them.
Right. Yeah, somebody else has put their reputation up, right?
Somebody's put their reputation to it. Somebody is willing to give them the microphone to be able to tell their story. Mm-hmm. And, and you have to be careful. You have to make sure that it's done not in a contrived way. Mm-hmm. I hate podcasts that are, here's your 10 questions I'm going to ask you as a podcast host. And there's lots of them out there. There truly is. Or, send me the questions that you'd like me to ask you, and I'll ask you the question. Okay, question number 3. What was it like being a child in this city? Those become really contrived very quickly. They're not authentic. Nobody wants to listen to them. No. Nobody's going to share them. But when somebody sits there and says, and what do you think about that? And you can answer that question authentically. All of a sudden people get a view into your soul. They get either into your personal soul or the soul of your company. And you give them reason to want to champion your brand. Mm-hmm. Because all of a sudden they have insights into you that they're not getting out of their way. You're not getting that in a magazine ad. You're not getting that in a YouTube, maybe in a YouTube post, but not in a LinkedIn post. You're not getting that. But when you can snip it and link people back to that full podcast, where all of a sudden people say, "Oh, that was interesting. Oh, here's the full conversation. Oh, okay. Well, I'm either going to listen to the full conversation. Oh, they've done a full transcript of that podcast. That's awesome. I am deaf. I can't actually listen to a podcast, but I have a full transcription that I can look at."
Sure.
So there's all those different ways to engage different audiences across different mediums and invite them to the conversation. Mm-hmm. And you're right. Small companies are going to do this in a small way. Coca-Cola is going to do it in a completely different way.
Sure.
We all don't have enormous, unlimited budgets that we can do this. There's lots of technology out there where you can be able to, do this simply. But think about it. The more content that you have, the more relevant content that you have that enables you to tell your story in a way that's authentic, that's real, and other people want to listen to, the better off you are as a company.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it kind of comes back to like one of our like main priorities and our kind of main beliefs as a company is that we want to be helpful, right?
Yeah.
Like, in everything that we do, we want to provide value and help someone. And so I think with a podcast, like you just genuinely get that, right? You're able to actually share your expertise, share your experiences, talk about some of the mistakes you made, and maybe that helps somebody else avoid those. And I think there's just so much value that you can provide to such a wide audience by going through podcasting, because you don't get a lot of the same feel through a written piece of content, like you were saying, or a LinkedIn post, right? Like you get to see on this podcast, we get to see Ben Baker's personality. We get to see what really, sparks that passion. And, you get to hear your actual story from your mouth.
Yeah, and not only that, is that during the period, I mean, we are in COVID-19. It is, summer 2020. People are looking for ways to utilize their time, whether it's on walks, whether it's drives, whether it's whatever. They want to learn. People want insight. They want inspiration. They want to think about things differently. They want to up their game. And podcasts are an amazing way of doing that because, there's two different ways of looking at it. There's 800,000 podcasts out there, give or take. The majority of people that run a podcast have under 10 episodes and it dies. And the reason for that is they don't have the systems in place. They don't have the processes in place. They don't have a media calendar in place in order to do it themselves. Right. So it's challenging to do this yourself. But when you do it and you become a guest on somebody else's show, or if you're a larger company and you have us do a show customized for you, it makes it easier. And then you have stuff that people want to listen to, and it allows you to tell your story in different ways to different people that they're going to hear it in your own voice. Because when you read an email, you see a tweet or a text or whatever, you're putting your own thought process in behind that. You're interpreting what that person is actually saying. Yep. When you're hearing it from their own voice, now they're hearing it in a language that that everybody understands the same way, the same thing. Because when you hear something, you can internalize it, and then you can recall it and you can retell it.
Yeah, I think one of the big takeaways from me thus far, there's really twofold. Like going back to Dustin's original question of why would I look towards podcasting to boost my marketing campaign? And there's been a couple big points. I think one, just in general, the technological world that we live in and the advancements we've seen, people are consuming information and data so differently now. Podcasts are such a hot thing, whether it's a comedy podcast or a crime podcast or a business podcast. People are looking for podcasts to fill their time when they're cooking or driving or running or whatever they're doing. And so people like doing business with who they can relate to, people that they like. And therefore the podcast does show that, like you said, kind of a peek into the soul of either the business or the person, and they can relate to that. But beyond just, that piece of it, as you've mentioned, this boosts so many other aspects of your marketing campaign. You've mentioned the clipping to add to different social media networks, or for your team to send out in their email campaigns, or to share with prospects, to share with clients. And then you even mentioned transcriptions, right? All of that transcription can be added to boost your SEO, to boost to your domain. Like there's so many pieces that just having a podcast isn't just a podcast and I've got 30 people that are listening, and it's helping. So, it's the old, a rising tide raises all boats, or
absolutely
along those lines,
absolutely.
So many different aspects of your actual marketing. And that's what's great about it.
Yep.
Well, it also builds trust. And that's the number one thing we want to think about, is that podcasts build trust. Because we recommend, and if you go onto the Podcast Host for Hire website, it's podcasthostforhire.com, there's a great video that we did with Darren Mitchell, who is the owner and CEO of Trout River Industries. They're a multinational company. And he tells a story of going to a sales meeting, and the guy that he's trying to sell to is staring at his phone and not looking up at him. And he says, "Well, if I do this, am I gonna have trouble?" No. You know, wait a second. Why are you not looking at me? Why are you not having eye contact? He says, "Because I'm watching your videos on my phone."
Yeah.
So he had already decided that the person that he was either listening to the audio or watching the video was far more important than the guy that was sitting across the table for him. And he was willing to trust that more than the person in front of him, even though it was the same person. Yeah. It was him on the 5 inches of real estate. And, so what it does is 24/7, 365 while you're sleeping, while you're on vacation, while you're on the phone, while you're with another customer, give you the opportunity to build trust with employees, with vendors, with clients, with strategic partners when you're not in the room. And that's powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great point. So with some of the, smaller, medium-sized businesses that have never kind of gone into the podcasting world, right? This is uncharted territory for them. What are some things or some tips that you can give, like, to get started? Like, how do they start taking those first steps? Because they're not going to be pros right away, right? Like it's a progression. Like, they've got to take some steps. But how do they get started?
I think there's a couple of things. The first thing, before you start your own podcast, guest on other people's podcast. Yeah. I would be, the first thing I would say is, you probably want to do 15 or 20 podcasts with different people before you even start your own, before you even start thinking about your own, because you're going to see the good, the bad, and the ugly. Mm-hmm. There are great podcasters out there. There are good podcasters out there. There's lousy podcasters out there. I just had somebody interview me that was horrific. He was absolutely horrific. He was unprofessional. He was unprepared. Just, it seemed absolutely distracted and wanted to be anywhere other than on the mic, and could care less about what I was talking about. He had his own agenda, and that was it. Yeah. And, those are not the people you want to be around, and those are not the people that you want to associate yourself with. When you do get on people's podcasts, you need to know why. Why, first of all, how can I add value to these person's audience? Right. These people have already built an audience. They've already got an audience. Who is their audience? And how can my message be modified to be able to be relevant to them? Yeah. If you're talking to, contractors versus business people versus whoever, you need to sit there and say, first of all, is this the podcast I really want to be on? Right. And second of all, if this is the podcast I want to be on, how do I speak in a language that's going to be relevant to them? You need to make sure that, you have a way for people to get in touch with you afterwards. Yeah. And you need to sit there and say, do I have a kit ready to give to this podcaster that has a short bio of me, an introduction, all my social media links, a decent headshot, maybe a corporate image that they can turn around and use and be able to do that. And when that, episode airs, you want to be there to be able to share it. So when they put out the episode, you want to make sure you as a guest are sharing it right along with them. Yep. Now, the challenge with most podcasts, and most people don't realize this, is podcasters tend to be 3, 6, 9 months in backlog. I'll record you in February. You may not come out till September. Right. And that's a challenge, because you need to make sure that your message is going to be out there, and say, when is this going to go out? Because you don't want to be talking about something that's relevant in the next 4 weeks if your podcast is going to be out in 6 months or a year. Right. Right. So you need to make sure that your information is evergreen, or if you know that it's going to be about this date, that you're talking about an event that's going to be happening then. Right. What we do is our show is scheduled often enough that we schedule our guests to coincide with their launch dates. So if they have a new book, if they have a new program, if they have a new whatever, we'll work with them to be able to sit there and say, okay, you need to be on this date because we need 4 weeks to get the show out, and let you know that within the next 4 weeks, you're going to be out. You know, your show is going to be out. And that's why we do multiple shows a week. But those are the challenges, and those are the things you need to be looking at. You know, how can I be relevant to the person's audience? First of all, is their audience of value to me?
Right.
You know, and if it is valuable to me, how can I communicate my message in a way that's going to be relevant to them? Yep. And how can I add value, and how can I make that host look good at the same time?
Yeah, and I think that's also a great point that, you know, with, you know, before, like when we're getting ready for a podcast, we're talking to, you know, the guest or whatever. And like one of the things that we've had guests come on, and we've had, you know, done episodes that we haven't aired because like it just turns into a commercial, right? It turns into a sales pitch that, oh, I just, you know, you should buy from me, buy from me, buy from me. And there's no real value being like transferred. Like the audience doesn't want to hear your sales pitch. They want to hear how they can start to move forward. Like what?
But a set of Ginsu knives. Everybody gets a set of Ginsu knives if they call me today at 6:04.
Yeah. And it's just one of those things that, like, you know, nobody's going to turn on a podcast and get excited about listening to a podcast that's really a commercial.
Exactly.
You know, and I think that's one of the things that a lot of businesses have to get out of that mindset, right? They want to just sell, and they're not really providing any value.
Well, it's the difference between marketing and advertising.
Mm-hmm.
And most companies don't understand the difference between branding, advertising, and marketing. Mm-hmm. The branding is who you are, what you do, and why you do it. The marketing is putting yourself in a position that there's awareness of your brand. And when people need you, they know how to find you.
Yeah.
Advertising is, I have something to sell today, who needs it?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And it's understanding that podcasting is marketing. It's not advertising.
Yep.
And having that marketing mindset of saying, I'm putting great content out there that is relevant, whether it's January or April or December, and people are going to grab it when they want it, how they need it. And if it moves them, if it's something that they find relevant, they know where to find you. And that's why you do it over and over and over and over and over again, because you provide different new content that people can just sit there and say, oh, there's something new. I didn't know about that about the company. Oh, that's something new about the company. Oh, that's something new about the company. Oh, that's great. I didn't know. Oh, wait a second. I need that. Maybe I should make a phone call.
Right.
And all of a sudden, you know, your marketing becomes an impetus for somebody to, you know, to want to pick up the phone or dial an email or whatever, mm-hmm. and get in touch with you. So people need to think of it as that long tail.
Yeah.
And not I'm going to sell something tomorrow.
Right. Yeah. I think it goes back to that whole building trust thing. You know, you said most podcasts don't make it past 10, but once you keep going, right, you're building that trust, you're building that authority. You're just showing that you're an expert in this field and you know what you're talking about. And they may not need you after episode 2 or 3 or 5 or 8, but then you get to 12 and 13 and 14 and they're like, man, I really trust these guys. I like these guys. And going back to episode 3, what they talked about, we do need that now. And I know it's a year later, but I can still call on these guys because I've stayed up with them. I trust them. I like what they have to say. Right. And so you're just continually building that, like you said, kind of for the long game rather than the advertising. I need it and I need it now.
Right. And here's another thing to say. Your first 10 episodes, I don't care who you are going to be horrible when you compare it to your 100. I mean, I don't know how many episodes you guys have done. I'm 165 or 170 episodes in. Yeah. I'm in my 4th year. If I go back to the first 15 or 20 episodes I did, I kind of, you know, shake my head and go,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could have done much better with those. Okay, I kind of wasted that guest.
But it's hard polishing.
Yeah.
It's the fun
but
part
it's a muscle. And unless you're flexing it, unless you're using it, you're not going to go to the gym and lift 400 pounds the first day.
Exactly.
You know, so take those first guests that are your buddies, that are your friends, that are people that know, like, and trust you, and interview them, you know, make them shine.
Yeah.
And then work on the, oh, God, you know, we'd really like to have these, and these people on the show. Make sure that you work out the kinks before you start bringing on, you know, people that don't know, like, and trust you onto the show.
Right.
I think those are all really great points. You know, it's just one of those things that there's so many distractions out there, and there's so many opportunities for marketing. There's so many things that you hear that you have to do this and you have to do this and you have to do that. You know, I think that podcasting is one of those things that either people don't feel like they have the expertise to do it, or it just intimidates them.
Yeah, so it is intimidating.
It is for sure. And I mean, when we started ours, it was one of those things like, oh crap, like what if I look stupid? What if I say something dumb? What if in our first episode, Michael has terrible math? But you know,
that's happened in a lot of episodes.
But you know, it's one of those things that, like, once you get started, you get more comfortable as you
Absolutely.
go. Like, you get more confident in what you're doing, and the episodes just get better.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think this has been a great conversation. I think there's a lot of great info here that, you know, a business can start to understand. Okay, there is value in jumping on another podcast, in starting our own podcast, and then using that in a multitude of ways, right? So the last kind of section of our podcast is how's the buzz?
The buzz is good.
Right?
The buzz is good. You know, I've been sneaking while you guys have been talking. So you haven't seen it, but you know, I'll
grab one of those swirly straws that goes all the way
exactly.
around.
Exactly. I'm taking it intravenously.
Yeah.
We'll just say that I'm taking it intravenously. We'll go with that. Either that, or I'll just chug along the whole thing when we're done.
Right. We're expecting a shotgun right after this.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, this is the first time I've had 1985. I'm actually in love.
I was legitimately sitting here thinking, like, I am going to have to pick up a 6-pack of this for the weekend.
Yeah, this
on
is
the way home. It's
see,
really
and there's your advertising along with your long-term marketing.
Way to go, New Belgium.
As far as beers we've drank on this podcast, this ranks near the top.
I think it's probably my favorite.
Yeah.
Well, there we go. Because, you know, the sun's over the yardarm somewhere, you might as well.
Exactly, right? You know what? If you're watching this podcast, I hope you're drinking along with us.
Right.
So, but Ben, it's been so great having you on. Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
And we'll have your contact information and everything down below. Be sure to reach out to Ben. Like, if you have questions about a podcast, if you're ready to kind of get started in that direction, whether it's hosting your own and, you know, creating some sort of branded podcast, or you want to jump on Ben's podcast, or you want to even just understand where to start, I think Ben is a great resource for that. And like I said, reach out to him. Contact information will be below. Make sure to like and subscribe, follow our podcast, and we'll have another episode for you in a couple weeks.
Guys, thanks for having me on the show. It was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ben.